Welcome to the Smart Driving Cars podcast. We appreciate you taking the time with us. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. Technical support is provided by CARTS, the Corporation for Automated Road Transportation Safety, a 501c3 corporation. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alain Kornhauser. Good morning, Alain.
Hey, good morning, Fred. I'm actually in my office. Can you believe it? I mean, never mind.
Well, terrific. And with us from Sweden, and we'll say good afternoon, is our friend, well-known transportation consultant and publisher of The Dispatcher, Michael Sena. Hi, Michael.
Hello, Fred. Hello, Alan. Great to be with you again.
In the February edition of The Dispatcher, the lead article is headlined, U.S. FTC wants to level the tech playing field. This is a tale of politics, a new young head of the Federal Trade Commission, and a warning about what may be at stake. Michael?
You know that I like context. So this is a long article, which is principally about the difficulty that democracies have with businesses. If we look at business management and business governance in the United States during its entire history, we have essentially two parts in a story. We don't know if this is going to be a third part that's evolving right now or developing, or if it's going to be a continuation of the second. The first part, which continued up to about 1910, 1911, when the major antitrust against Standard Oil went through and Standard Oil was broken up, and continued up until the time of the Reagan administration, when companies were looked upon as potential enemies of the people, and that they needed to be, according to the rule of law at that point, they needed to be restricted in what they could do, anti-collusion, antitrust, in a sense, kept small because they had gotten so big. And beginning around the time of the first Reagan presidency and continuing through the 80s, that changed. And it changed primarily because of Robert Bork, who was submitted by President Reagan to be a Supreme Court judge and was rejected, not because he was against the current way of thinking about business, but about the way he was thinking about racial issues. But that's another story. It changed from being focused on businesses competing with each other to citizen welfare. And what Bork said, and what became the practice from that point, late 80s, was that if the consumer is helped, if the consumer is getting better service, better prices, better products, then it really doesn't matter what the businesses are doing, as long as they're not breaking the law. And the law, as far as competition is concerned, was being reinterpreted from companies have to be able to compete, big companies, small companies, everybody has to compete on the same basis, to a big company can be as big as it wants to be, as long as it's not colluding, as long as it's not taking over markets that it doesn't belong in, or it doesn't have business in. But vertical integration, vertical cooperation, which helps to lower prices and provide better products, is totally okay. In the previous period, which really started with Louis Brandeis, who interpreted the law and helped to implement the antitrust, which continued through his time as on the Supreme Court up until in the 30s. The interpretation was you have to be able to compete. Even if you're a small fry, you have to be able to compete with the big fries. And they can't, the big fries can't eat up the small fries. They have to be allowed to continue to do whatever it is they're doing. So what's happened now in the last year since since President Biden came in, he has allowed, principally through his, let's say he's got some debts to pay to some people, including Elizabeth Warren. And Elizabeth Warren came in with the concept that we're going to control the banks, we're going to control the business, we're going to break them up, and we're going to do everything we can to make the big guy small so that everybody can compete and everybody has a fair chance. And that's where we are right now. President Biden nominated and had approved a 32-year-old woman person, let's just leave it at that, without any experience in management, any experience in business, except for her positions taken in law school and afterwards of being a trust buster, someone who was going to go in there and break up all of these large companies and make sure that they aren't competing on unfair terms. What I tried to do in this piece was not to say this is good, this is bad, except in the last sentence. I had to give you my feeling about what I think about all this, but through the article, to try to say this is how it's developed, this is where it all came from, this is where it's going, these are the people, these are the reasons, and now we are where we are, and we're not in the same situation as the EU. I didn't bring in the EU too much into this because it's a very different situation there, and they're working on very different terms, but they're trying to do exactly the same thing: punish, take as much money out of Alphabet and Amazon and everybody else, and spread it around so that all of the other companies can compete. We're going to see. I mean, there's an election coming up, midterm. You know, are the Democrats going to continue to control both the House and the Senate? I don't think so, for lots of reasons. I'd like those reasons not to have come to the fore. I've made my position very clear in many ways and at many times, and where my sympathies lie. But I think that there's so many things that have occurred during these last 12 months that are going to make it difficult, and this is one of them. The stakes are very high, and this is one thing that I think that Elizabeth Warren and the people around her have not really considered. If you look at what, and I started out by saying democracies have a hard time with businesses, a hard time with controlling them, a hard time with living with them. Countries like China don't have a problem with businesses. They tell the businesses what they should do, and if they don't do it, they find ways of either eliminating them or making them do what they're supposed to do, according to them. But in democracies, it doesn't work that way. People have the rights to do certain things, and they have rights to develop businesses. And if those businesses succeed, they get bigger, they have more profit. And what companies like Alphabet and Microsoft and Amazon and Apple are doing is that they're investing lots and lots of money. I think next month I'm going to talk about exactly how much that is, but it's a lot of money. They're investing huge sums of money in order to be able to compete with each other, not to be able to eliminate all, but to compete with each other, and more importantly, to be able to compete with the companies in China, principally. There really isn't anybody that's in a position to have companies like that, but primarily in China, for putting up space capsules, for doing research in artificial intelligence. China is publishing more papers in artificial intelligence than the United States. Now, the fact is that most of the people in artificial intelligence who are doing any research of note in China are actually working in the United States, because the United States is leading in lots of fields. but the possibilities that this is going to lead to more developments in China. The United States has, and the people know this, they're not competing anymore with, getting more land or getting more money. They're competing with something that's even much more serious. The United States is it's in a fight with China. Whether people want to agree with that or whether they want to believe it or not, the fight is with China. Russia's a sideshow. The EU is not competing with the United States. It's an ally, but the end game here is between the United States and China. And if you start going after the companies that are doing the research, that are putting all of the money and the efforts into building the systems that are going to be needed in order to be able to compete effectively, you got a problem. And the Republicans haven't pushed that button heavily yet, but they're going to start pushing it very soon, up to this next election, and then 2 years hence in the following election. So I think that, how does this all relate to what the dispatcher is about? It relates very heavily to what the dispatcher is about, because a lot of the investment that's going in to AI, and I mean the statistics I've got these right here, but it's like a 25, 25, 25, 25. It's in cities. But a quarter of it at least is in transportation. It's in developing transport systems that can do lots of things that transport systems cannot do today, but we're all trying to do today. So that's what the first article in the February issue of the Dispatcher is about.
Well, Michael, I certainly appreciate what you put in there. I think, as you said, it puts it all in a context and sort of suggests that that we're maybe in a different situation today than we have been in the past, which, of course, we'd always like to think we're in a different situation today than we've been in the past. A couple interesting questions that I have, or things that, what if we were in 1908 right now with Henry Ford with what we have? What the heck would have happened to Henry and that whole vertical integration? I mean, that was all part of that to prevent. Would we have a better car out here today? Would we be better, or would we be worse? Maybe a potential question to ask. One of the, I don't know, I'm not a big reader, as you know. You're a much better reader than I am. One of the things that sort of happened in my sort of going through part of this recent time is there was an antitrust action taken against IBM at one point to limit its influence in universities, because if you go back to when I first came to Princeton, or when you were here, I mean, we had IBM 360 here. The mainframe was king, whatever, and of course IBM was really desiring to have me and a bunch of other people, teach stuff that would, of course, utilize all the IBM capabilities. Sure. And there was a little thing that happened that said, hey, IBM, back off giving stuff to Kornhauser or Princeton or stuff like that, because of course that might be antitrust. Let people like Apple and Steve Jobs in here and put their nose in the tent to have some competition. And of course, the rest is somewhat history on that one. I mean, he would have never gotten that. And then there was the whole thing with Microsoft at some point saying, hey, you better let somebody else have access to Office. Otherwise, and I think, I think it's correct that Microsoft actually then said, okay, here, Apple, here it is. It runs on your system. And at that point, what was Apple selling for? Like 2 cents or something like that.
I think Microsoft actually bailed Apple out when they were.
Michael's a better. I'm just this is just my recollection of sort of what I went through, which I think were monumental events, in which I consider monumental events in these things. And you asked the real question, which is, what should government be about? What should democracy? What should even a benevolent dictatorship be about? Is the welfare of the people. I mean, that's really what I guess it should be about. Maybe that's overly simplistic. And they led to this situation. And then the other thing that I like to throw in there is the difference that we have maybe today, is almost anybody may have access to a megaphone here to let people know about what they have, simply because of the internet, inner tubes, whatever we want to call them. It doesn't do a good job discriminating and so on, and we get a lot of crap out there, as we well know. But in a sense, even the little guy may have an opportunity out there to be heard, much more of an opportunity to be heard than, let's say, Marx and Lenin in 1910 or whatever that they had, simply because this thing exists out here that does allow some stuff out there. So I don't know, comments on all those, Michael. They're all things that run through my mind as I've read what you've written here and so on.
Well, when I read that the people who are working with the FTC, who have been hired by President Biden in his administration, Department of Justice, various positions, and they say we want to go back to when competition was the important factor. This whole business, and they just completely ignore the concept of consumer welfare, because they feel that at any point in time that the companies who are now offering things for free can turn around and say, well, we're going to now charge you, and you can't get what we have for you unless you pay us a fee. Now, I've said this many times, I do not use Amazon, Facebook, Meta, Google, anything that Google has. I don't have that on my PC. So yes, I do use Microsoft. Yes, I do have an iPhone and an iPad. But I don't use the features that allow them, Google, Alphabet, or Facebook, to make tons of money through the advertising concept. If I buy a book, I use a local website. If I don't buy the book, like I did last week, and I went into Stockholm specifically to buy a book at a bookstore, I did that, and I do that. I don't have to use these services. So there's a very big difference between where these people were in 1910, 1911. When the coal barons, the coal barons and the steel barons and the oil barons, they were collecting a resource that, if they didn't share it and if they owned it all, it was really a monopoly, because you couldn't get something else. But when we're looking at today, data it's not a resource that if you eat it, it's gone. Or if you cut it up and divide it up into different people and they consume it, it's gone. It's still there. You can continue to use it as much as you want to use it. I mean, they're talking about a concept of competition, which is it doesn't exist today as it did in 1890 or 1910 or even 1930. We're not talking about a scarce resource or a resource that can be garnered, land, even money. I mean, the fact that these companies, take Apple, for example, Apple's its valuation, $2 trillion, but that money it's paper money. I mean, the last couple of weeks, it was it was in another direction, right? That money doesn't just stay there, but they're investing huge amounts of this money to be able to develop new products, because they know, I mean, Apple, for example, knows they could disappear tomorrow.
Right.
And if you look at IBM, IBM is a very, very good example. Where is IBM today? Does anybody talk about IBM?
They're in the toilet.
They're in the toilet. We talk about the mamas, you know, Meta, Apple, Amazon, who's the other one? Microsoft and the third,
Alphabet.
Alphabet. Yeah, I keep forgetting that.
Yeah.
It's not Mamai, you know, IBM is gone. I mean, who cares about IBM?
It's amazing. It's amazing, you know, and there has been that, and everybody knows that. I guess everybody knows in those organizations, if they don't continue to basically invest and invent and bring new, guess what? A Google is going to come out of the woodwork and have it for lunch.
Exactly.
Okay? And if you look at the amount of money that they invest, Washington can't compete.
No,
they can't compete. There's been, you know, as we like to say, just in this automation applied to mobility, there's been what, 200 billion invested by the private sector. You know, what's NSF's budget for everything? Are you joking?
Here's a statistic.
Maybe the military can do it, but holy mackerel, they don't lead in any. They can't lead in anything.
Here's a statistic. In 2021, the Big Five spent 149 billion, equivalent to roughly a quarter of that total. The total of the investment in 2020, America's public and private spending on R&D added up to 713 billion. The Big Five on their own, just those five, spend 149 billion. That is significantly higher than the largest single government R&D budget, that of the Pentagon. Those five companies have spent more than the Pentagon.
Yeah,
I mean, they're making.
Right, and the Pentagon has a big responsibility to fundamentally keep us safe, you know, and that's the biggest budget in the universe, in the whatever, in the, you know, in the Big Bang, you know.
Exactly.
Talk about the Big Bang, Alan. I think the case of Bell Labs comes to mind here, and what happened when AT&T, the Bell system, was broken up. There were claims at first, I think, that Bell Labs would continue on with the pure research that it was doing, but you don't hear much about Bell Labs anymore.
True. The silence is deafening. It's gone elsewhere, and you know, and you could argue that they're doing these things just to improve themselves in some sense. But guess what? What all that stuff involves also the development of people. And as we've seen in all these industries, they don't have a lock on the people. And all of a sudden you see somebody leave. I mean, how many people have left supposedly Apple's automated car group? I mean, the doors, I mean, there's flow of people out of that thing continuously that take that. And sure, you know, you have non-competes and so on and so forth, but you know, what ends up in those people's brains, in their ingenuity? I mean, it's the ingenuity of people that creates this stuff. It does. There's not an AI autonomous whatever that creates this stuff. It's not, you know, it's the people and that investment in that people and what's been done. And as you mentioned, you know, we really need to do that investment here. Otherwise, the investment's going to be elsewhere, and then we're in a heap of trouble.
And the thing that if you look at the people who were involved in these activities, Elizabeth Warren, she moved to Massachusetts, lives in the town that I lived in, has been a professor at Harvard, and then ran for the Senate and has been a senator since 2013. Lena Khan, she's 32. I mean, she's never worked in one of these companies. She doesn't, and Bernie Sanders talks about, you know, I'm going to help the people. You got to, you know, get all that money you can out of Elon Musk, and they've got to pay taxes, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes down to it, what people want is a job so that they can pay the bills. They're not talking about jobs to help them pay the bills. Little companies, yes, they're important for having a baseline, but little companies are developed in democracies so that they can either get big or be bought. I mean, if you're a little craftsman, yes, you want to stay in business and continue doing what you're doing, making fishing reels or whatever it is. But if you're a company like the companies that are developing now, you want to get big or be bought, and that's the role you're playing. And if you're bought, your people come in, and the other guy that bought you gets bigger. Or I mean, this is how it works, and it doesn't seem like this point gets through to people who say we've got to take these big companies to task, we've got to break them up so that the other companies can compete. It doesn't work that way. And
well, I guess what you're telling, Michael, is a cautionary tale here, a note that take a hard look at what you're doing, and you have a cautionary note to President Biden at the end of this piece.
Yes, I do.
Well, also in the February edition of the Dispatcher, regulatory oversight of driverless cars receiving a second look in California. That's something we've talked about, Alan, too. So, Michael, tell us what you're writing here.
Well, it's written as a letter to California Governor Newsom. There are laws on the books in every state in the United States that are based on the Geneva Convention and 1949 Geneva Convention, and also laws that have been developed, or standards that have been developed in the United States. The United States is not a party or a signature to the Vienna Convention, 1968. Europe is, and lots of other countries, but the United States and China are not signatories to that convention. And that convention is much more specific when it comes to having control by a human of their vehicle. But even in the Geneva Convention, it's mentioned, and it's very clear and it's specific, that if you are selling a car, that car has to be controlled by a driver, and that driver is someone who is human. It's not some technique that you can use. Now, there's been a very nice paper written by a lawyer at the University of South Carolina, Walker Smith. Yeah.
Walker Smith. Sorry, I was on mute.
Yeah. That says that automated driving is probably not illegal according to the laws. That's the title of the paper. It's probably not illegal. But in this article that I've written, what I say is that to the governor, you have made life difficult for yourself because you've made the mistake, and I refer to you, Alan, in the article, you've made the mistake of using the wrong term to define something that confuses not only your own people at your Department of Motor Vehicles, but the people who are you're intending to regulate. So what California did, similar to what they've done in Florida and Arizona, they passed a law that said you have to have a license from us, from our Department of Motor Vehicles, to test autonomous cars, to deploy autonomous cars, and to sell autonomous cars, to put those cars on the road. The implication being, and the article that was written by a newspaper article written by Russ Mitchell, saying that California now is going to look at Tesla specifically because they don't think they're living up to the requirements. Tesla actually does have a license to test, quote, autonomous cars in California. which means that they have to abide by all of the rules for testing. But the fact is that, according to me, Tesla has deployed and is selling, quote, autonomous cars. Tesla also said, how they can do this, I don't know, because they have a license for testing autonomous cars. They say this law doesn't apply to us because our cars aren't autonomous. And when they say our cars aren't autonomous, they mean driverless. When California says autonomous, they mean self-driving. They mean that there's a person in the car who can take over control of that vehicle, because they know that a car in totally driverless mode is not legal. There's no way that a car can be put on the road unless there's an exemption like there is in Arizona and like what they've done in California for, quote, testing. And it has to be done in a specific way, a specific location, ODD. And Tesla isn't living up to any of these requirements. They're not living up to any of the testing requirements because they say it doesn't apply to us. But they have a license they should be testing. So it's a very confusing situation. And it makes it more confusing when people are using a term that they use a term like autonomous, meaning one thing, and another person uses it in a completely different way. Instead of saying the car drives itself without anybody in the car able to take control of that car, or one step more, there's nobody over there in some center that is looking at this car all of the time and is able to take control of that car if something happens. Now, that's what this article that's written by the lawyer Smith says. If you interpret the laws that are on the books right now and say a car, if it's controlled by a human but it's remotely, that seems to be okay. Probably, he uses the term probably. It's probably okay. So the people who are working on this, oh, he says it's probably okay. Well, it's probably okay. California says, oh, well, yeah, maybe it's probably okay, but we're not really sure. But so we have this little regulation that says you have to abide by all these rules that we set up. But then Tesla says, well, somebody said it was probably okay. So what's the story? What's the problem? Why do you have a problem with me selling these cars? The people can jump in the back seat. The car drives itself. It was probably okay that they do that, right? He didn't crash. Well, California is now, the state of California is suing somebody who went through a red light, slammed into somebody in a Tesla, slammed into somebody, and the two people in the car died. And the people, the families of those people are also suing Tesla, because Tesla's got bigger, deeper pockets rather than going after the person who was driving the car. So it's confusing, but it's confusing because people are not thinking about what they should be thinking about. A driverless car, somebody without any control, nobody is having any control except the software and the hardware in the car. There's nobody back there taking care of it. There's nobody sitting in the seat who can take over the controls. Driverless. That is not legal anywhere in the United States. It's certainly not legal anywhere in Europe because they did sign the Vienna Convention, and they're now, groups are trying to especially the UNECE, who are responsible for these conventions. They're trying to make amendments to this that allow, in certain locations, for driverless cars. But right now, you cannot sell one, but Tesla is. They say, well, when our car isn't driverless, we tell people you have to have your hands on the wheel. You can't. But if you can drive the car, if the car can drive with you sitting in the back seat, or if you falling asleep and continuing on, if you're watching a video, you're not looking at anything, the car is driving itself. That car is driverless. That's my point.
Well, out of all that, the enormous confusion is, of course, with the English language here. The confusion is with the English language. The word autonomous, okay? I mean, I claim it's, a Silicon Valley hype of whatever. Autonomous? Are you kidding? Will they ever be able to just do this stuff. I mean, they'll never be even as autonomous, I guess, as I put in the e-letter, as an amoeba. At least an amoeba knows it has to eat or consume some sort of energy to live on, and it goes on and does this on its own. But there's never been any thought of this thing. If these things are things to provide mobility for people or goods, they're going to do it on their own. Are you kidding? Whatever. I mean, it's like silly to even use the word. There's going to be an oversight. There's going to be a management. There's going to be a responsibility. There's going to be a direction. There's going to be an orchestration. There's going to be a revenue capture, a money disposal, and a customer involved in this thing that's going to say, I approve or don't approve at some point. And it's going to be that. It's not some autonomous thing that goes out there by itself with AI, artificial intelligence. Get out of here. There is none. It's not even close.
We talked
all this crap that we hear about and so on is all Silicon Valley hype. Okay, so let's get down to the reality of these things, we've tried to do this with respect to the naming conventions here with this. It's be okay if it's self-driving, if it helps me out. I don't have to have my foot on the gas. I don't have to necessarily have my hand on the wheel. But if the thing is not good enough to when I say, hey, go, it can do it on its own, and that's not autonomous. That's me saying I put it into drive. Okay, that's all it is. However, those out there, I guess, looking for flips as opposed to looking for creating a business and a market have used these terms, and then of course now they're baked in some sort of regulation. And so if you go to the Tesla manual, it says definitely you must remain. You can't hop in the back. I don't know if they explicitly say you can't hop in the back seat, but they say you're the one that's responsible. And I don't know what they're going to do in this California thing, but I would imagine they're going to argue, look at your owner's manual. It said you're responsible. You got it. It doesn't, whatever. Now, of course, Elon never says it. It never gets tweeted out. It's not in Tesla's advertising. Oh, that's right. They don't advertise. They just tweet.
Yes,
okay.
right.
I mean, okay. As opposed to what does the GM thing look like now? Hey, look, I can do the boop, boop as I'm going down the road. I mean, talk about somebody who may be in trouble with what the hell they're doing, and the person, I don't know what they're doing. I guess it's a good system. I like it and so on, whatever. It probably works well, but damn it, these folks have gone out there and they're totally, all of them are totally irresponsible at saying, hey, this is yours. It's your insurance. It's your life. It's you. You've got to remain there. And you're about to kill me.
Yep.
So damn it, behave.
Alan, we talked last week about what the IHS is doing evaluating the partial automation systems. Right. And they're saying that their rating systems want to ensure that drivers stay focused on the road and that these systems make that clear. So of
course, and they're the highest grade they're giving now today is good. Great. I mean, they're not the great inflation we have here at Princeton and Harvard, of course, where you got to have an A++ to, last person on the client. Never mind. That's another issue.
Well, we'll be back, but this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETFs, Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The symbol is MOTO. To get more info, head to motoetf.com. On the website, you can look for the white paper. It's called The Smart Transportation Revolution. It's under the Insights and News tab. Some great information there to help you make informed decisions about investing. ETFs, as you probably know, can be a smart way to spread risk with investments, maybe focus on a particular category of stocks. The website, again, is motoetf.com. We're back with more of Smart Driving Cars and our guest, Michael Sena, publisher of The Dispatcher. Before we move on to some headlines, Michael, you highlight in the dispatcher the coming departure of the CEO of Volvo Cars on March 21st.
Yeah, Håkan Samuelsson. He's done a phenomenal job. I mean, he came in at a time the company had been bought by Geely. They hired somebody from Volkswagen who thought he was going to run the company in his way, his image, and he found out fairly quickly that wasn't what he was supposed to be doing. He was supposed to be listening to Li Shufu, Mr. Li, who now calls himself Eric Li. I don't know if it's any reference to Eric the Red or something Swedish, but that's what he calls himself now.
Ouch.
So Håkan Samuelsson came in. He has a ton of experience. He's Swedish. He's able to maneuver in all kinds of different situations. He worked for Scania. He worked in Germany. He came in and he did a phenomenal job. He took the company from 300,000, 350,000 cars and almost got to the goal of 800,000 cars. They've been able to do an amazing job of bringing out new cars and also bringing out electric cars, hybrid, plug-in hybrids. But just before they were going to have their IPO, the board, the Volvo board, said, well, we now have the search on for replacement for Håkan Samuelsson. Now his contract had just been renewed to the end of 2022, and he's taking them into the IPO. And for some reason, the board thought this was a good idea, so that people will know that there will be some sort of continuity when Håkan Samuelsson finally does leave. And everybody went wild. They said, "Hey, look, forget your IPO, because if you don't have a CEO who can continue to do what Håkan Samuelsson is doing, forget it. We're not going to invest in you." And there were a couple of other puddles that they laid. In any case, Håkan came in and he said, "I'm here to the end of 22. My contract ends. That's when I'm leaving, and so you can depend on me until January, whatever it was, January 6th. And he said, the board announced, now we have the new CEO. He's some guy that used to work for a couple of companies. I don't know, BlackBerry, and he worked for the Dyson, the company that I wrote about, Dyson trying to come into the electric car business. It came in and put his foot down, in the puddle, and then said, that's wet. Then they got out of it very quickly. So I don't know what Jim Rowan is going to be able to do, if he's going to be able to manage up as Håkan has done. But the good news for Volvo is that it has made the IPO, and it's watered down the ownership of Geely. So it's a bit safer as a company that's going to be able to do what it should be doing, as opposed to trying to do what Geely thinks it should be doing. But you can tell I've got an attitude here, and it's it comes from having worked for Volvo as an employee, having been a consultant to Volvo for over 20 years after I was an employee, and having lots of folks still in Volvo who were doing a terrific job to keep that company both independent and moving forward. So I wish him lots of luck, but I don't know. The non-Swedes have not done well at the helm of Volvo Cars, and there's a reason. There's a really good reason for it. That would take another hour.
We shan't ask. We can imagine.
And as far as Dyson's concerned,
yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
they decided they couldn't clean up in the car business. But
no, exactly. No pun intended and taken.
A couple of headlines we want to get to from the Smart Driving Cars newsletter. From Andrew Hawkins at The Verge, the self-driving car industry is abandoning the term self-driving and leaving it to Tesla. The AV industry's top lobbying group in Washington has changed its name from the Self-Driving Coalition for Safer Streets to the Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association. Alan?
Wow. I mean, again, using this word autonomous.
Oh, we were talking about them. The mix up in the terms here.
I mean, come on. What they selling bling? They selling Silicon Valley smoke and mirrors, or are they trying to sell some mobility that's going to be of value to the society that Michael was talking about? Okay. I mean, that whole industry, really? It's about the LIDARs, SMIDARs, and WIDARs and gigahertzes, as opposed to moving some packages and moving some people more efficiently and better for society and more equitably and so on. Come on, what the hell are you lobbying for? Sorry, never mind.
It's about mobility. Meanwhile, Elon Musk said during this week's Q4 earnings call that he's extremely confident the company's full self-driving suite will be finished by the end of this year. The earnings, by the way, during the quarter beat Wall Street expectations, but Musk still is warning about supply chain issues.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, he's using the excuse, and it's whatever you hear. And it's, look, at least they're profitable. However, you know, they're doing whatever on the books to show profit. So I think that's good. And there's an article about how efficient they are in building cars, and I think that's all good. Although maybe easier to build an EV than it is something else. So I think that's all good. Those are all positive things. The shame, to me, the real shame of Tesla is they could back off on the hype, become more and more serious about what they have and don't have, about the challenges of really doing stuff, and be a little bit more, I guess, let's call it honest about this. And I think that they would do a heck of a lot better. My goodness, if you look at who's actually selling EVs, you know, they're in the US, it's essentially them. I mean, they have the lion's share of the market. The others are like, I mean, you know, they're Johnny come latelys. And it's kind of a shame that it's still out in this sort of Silicon Valley hype, and you know.
You're talking about using the name full self-driving to some extent.
Well, I mean, hey, we use the term not with full on in front of it. Why not self-driving so that it drives itself some of the time? Okay, so I can take my hands off the wheel for some of the time. And I can take my hand, it's more important that I have my foot next to the brake as opposed to my hand on the wheel. I think nobody says, hey, keep your foot on the brake. And you know, if you look at intelligent cruise control, it's all about your feet. Look about what works well in these things. To me, that's what works well. That's what makes driving at least a little bit tolerable. And I don't go running up somebody's behind because I didn't hit the brake. It does it for me. I mean, to me, those are the valuable. But that's my perspective on this thing. But to think that it's going to go out and do the whole damn thing and so on, that I can hop in the back seat. Tesla is never going to sell me a car in which the fine print says, hey, Alan, you can hop in the back seat. You're good. Okay. Neither will GM, neither will Mercedes, neither will Ford, neither will whatever, because if they put that in the fine print, then if the thing happens that happened in California, guess who's responsible? I think, I mean, I would suspect any jury would say, of course, Elon, you're responsible. Who? When's he going to tweet that? I'm responsible for anything bad that happens with my car. Trust me, I got you covered. Waiting to hear for that one. What do you think, Michael?
Well, Volvo has said exactly that. You know, when we tell you we've got a car that you can sit there and not keep your hands on the wheel, then we're going to be responsible. They've said that. Elon Musk has not. He hasn't said that. Right?
But Volvo has said is when.
Exactly.
Not it's not. Hey,
no.
Now
No.
we're gonna.
Yeah,
hey, talk
exactly.
to me about the gunnas. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna do a lot of things. You know, I'm gonna become rich.
Yes.
Yeah, right. I'm not
But in the
rich.
dispatcher, I
I mean,
take on the term and try to parse the term full self-driving. What does the word full mean?
Oh, no,
Depends.
full, it's
No,
got no chance.
it depends on the language. In Swedish, it means drunk.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
All right, so you gotta, right. So you gotta,
no.
At some point, I come back. The brick comes
Touche,
through the window.
touche,
Exactly. No.
touche. Yeah, no,
There
no.
is what if you parse the whole term full self-driving, it means perfect travel by a motorized vehicle by itself. That's what they're saying they have. Perfect travel by a motorized vehicle by itself. And they don't have that.
It's Silicon Valley speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and we got to stop that, because most of that has been for the purpose of a flip, not to create a something that in fact has substance and delivers consumer and social value.
Yep,
it's to flip it, not to deliver. Okay, at least my view. But and so cut it out. We're tired of it in New Jersey. I'll speak for New Jersey. We're tired of it.
We're tired of it in Strängnäs, Sweden as well.
Alan, you comment on a report that says sales of EVs jumped 83% last year in the U.S. to just about 435,000, but we're still just 3% of the market overall. And you were surprised at that number.
Yeah, I don't know. I tripped over it. Then I tried to find things, and then you go and Google and you can't even get a straight answer. And I just got tired. I mean, you hear Elon saying he sold a million or close to a million.
Yeah,
and
close.
And really, more than 50% of those were in Europe and non-US. Maybe, I don't know.
Mostly China.
Maybe he sold them mostly China. I don't know. Maybe
about half of those are in the United States. The other half are mostly in China, and then you go to Norway and Sweden and a few other places.
Sure. So if you do that, you're out of a million. You're still 400,000. There's 400,000 here, 400,000 Tesla. Looks like they have 100% of the market. They don't. They have like if you finally find it, it's like 60% or 65% or whatever.
I think it's actually more, but even so,
whatever. Even so, I just that was a frustration thing that I had. That I get too frustrated when I read some of this stuff, and I just threw that one in there. Go ahead, Fred.
From a LinkedIn post by Waymo co-CEO Dmitry Dolgov, in 2021, it says, we ramped up testing in San Francisco, driving a total of 2.7 million auto miles. The volume and quality of this data has been key for training and evaluating our 5th generation Waymo driver and ensuring safe operations in San Francisco. So this post at least didn't even mention Arizona.
Didn't mention Arizona, didn't mention, coming to Jersey or to Trenton or, going where it's actually valuable. I mean, can they really be still in the testing mode of a business? I mean, does Alphabet have that deep a pocket? I guess they do. Or is this problem so darn tough that not even that can solve it, can do it? I mean, when do you build a business out of this? I mean, what are they funded by? The National Science Foundation?
They're funded by something that's bigger than the National Science Foundation. It's called Alphabet.
No, I understand that, but you would hope that something funded by Alphabet is doing it to be able to deliver social value, societal value. Not just do another thing when it's gonna do a. And apparently, I would have been more impressed if he would have said, oh my goodness, our growth in Chandler in number of customers using this on a daily basis has gone up to 2%. And this is really providing mobility to folks and a value to our society. No, we're going to start moving lunches so that you can just order up and have your lunch delivered. Cut it out. I mean, you should be embarrassed after spending all that money, doing all that testing, doing all that stuff, that you haven't even found a market to start it, where you can say, I am delivering societal, social value, some value proposition. giving somebody some mobility that's better than other things that they have. Not that if I put it in my mode split model that is, of course, has AI and has a probability that anybody takes this to be 10 to the minus 38. Of course, I'm exaggerating here.
Embarrass them enough so that they get their cars into Trenton.
I'm trying.
Starting in May. Well, we've got to do more.
I'm trying.
We've got to do
I'm
more
trying.
to embarrass them.
They pay no attention to us.
Yeah.
Okay, and that tells me something. That tells me something. Okay.
Can't you get Kraftchick? That's the former CEO. I mean, I guess he's got a non-compete or he can't talk.
Probably has. He can't talk. He's not going to say. Yeah. I don't know that. Look, they don't even have.
We would love for Waymo to come on with us and discuss this.
Yes,
so
exactly.
We've invited them, and they said, "Whoa, we don't do that." I even went I went to on the Society of Automotive Engineers podcast this past week. I mean, can you imagine? In the lines then? I mean. And I had a great time with Grayson. So we did a great podcast, I think, whatever.
How many levels did you talk about? Never mind.
We had a good discussion. I mean, look,
on the subject of the societal value, Alan, we do want to remind people, we just mentioned it in passing, that the next summit is in the planning stages coming up this spring, the Smart Driving Car Summit.
We're going to do it. We're going to have it. We're going to make it happen. If somebody shows up, great. If nobody shows up, then I guess we'll sit there and twiddle our thumbs, and the three of us will sit there and whatever. It's fine. I guess, if the folks that are in this business are in to flip it, then, don't come. All right. We don't want a mechanism for you to flip it to somebody else who's going to have to carry it and try to make some societal value out of this. We're trying to deliver finally some value out of this. It's not something that we're going to stick up on the shelf and be, hey, this is another one of the publications, but here we go. We got another one of these. No. Okay. This is finally to do something, and damn it, who's doing it? Waymo a little bit in Chandler. I guess have to give them credit for that, because nowhere else as far as I can tell in the world. I mean, so stuff coming out of China. I mean, you can't tell whether or not it's real, imaginary, smoke and mirrors, whatever. I'm sorry. I hope they are. They have a large society, 1.4 billion people that they should be trying to deliver some value to. Hopefully that's what they're doing.
Again, that's coming up in May, and there's more info on the website, on the CART's website as well, right now.
Right. Anyway, so if you want to come help out, try to make it happen to actually deliver some societal value. We think that there's societal value. I finally was able to convince Michael that there might be some societal value. It wasn't easy, but I think that, we may have found some. I think there's an enormous amount of societal value in the automated driving assistance stuff that is coming out in the cars, and I take my hat off to the OEMs for putting that in there and doing that irrespective of what the hell they happen to call it. I happen to think that what Tesla's done, it has made the cars safer, better, easier to drive. The folks that I know don't abuse it and seem to like it. Whatever. It's just a shame. It's darn shame that from the top it's not being promoted what I think is correctly. Okay.
Yep.
We want to thank you, Michael, for taking the time with us again. Always terrific. And so appreciate
it's always my pleasure. I never know when we start. I never know where we're gonna go today. But I always know
it's autonomous. It's an autonomous.
I mean, talk about, you need a worldview to be autonomous. I mean, not what else controls you, but one's worldview. One has to worry about the extent of our worldview. But yeah, I guess we do have a worldview. Yes.
The website is michaelsena.com. Thank you to our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol for the ETF is MOTO. More information is available at motoetf.com. Technical support is provided by CARTS, the Corporation for Automated Road Transportation Safety, a 501c3 corporation. You can find us at smartdrivingcar.com, on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon, Apple, Google. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can ask your smart speaker to play us too. You can find my tech reports at textination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alain Kornhauser. Thank you for listening or watching, and continue to stay safe.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you.